So with that, I'm just going to dive right into it. Merry Christmas, everybody. Really excited to be sharing everything that you need to know about purchase orders on Ivy. So this webinar idea came about, first of all, purchase orders are such an integral part of Ivy and your workflow. And we want to make sure that you are making the most out of what you can do with purchase orders on Ivy. So I want to go ahead and dive into it, just tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. I'm basically going to go through the entire picture of purchase orders on Ivy, starting with something in your account settings, your products, all the way through the PO itself. And then lastly, how you can report on your POs, how you can see a global overview of all your POs, really just understanding the workflow as it pertains to purchase orders specifically. So with that, I'm going to get started here in the top right-hand corner of my account and go ahead and click on my account. And the reason why I'm starting here is because I want to bring your attention to this addresses tab, because the address tab is an area, it's your address book where you can basically save frequently used addresses for your for which will populate not just in your project but specifically on your POs. So if you use a receiving warehouse, if you have a fabricator, you're working with custom furniture, you have a warehouse, whatever it is, this is the place for you to store all of your frequently used addresses so that you can easily populate them onto your project and more specifically your purchase orders. You know, part of the beauty of Ivy is not having to do all those repetitive administrative nitty-gritty things. And this is one way that you can do that, is by storing your frequently used addresses here and then populating them onto your purchase orders. So you'll see right over here, I have my receiving warehouse, and this is my default shipping address for a project that we will go into. But if you have any of those types of addresses, this is the place for you to stay them. Okay, perfect. So I want to also talk a little bit about products. And, you know, products are the reason why I want to talk about them is because I want you to kind of understand how Ivy works, in that how we separate the client-facing versus the vendor-facing information, and what exactly is client-facing and what exactly is vendor-facing. And the way that you can think about this is when you add a product to your library, either via the Clipper or manually in your product library, which is exactly where I am right now, your product library consists of everything that you store, all those frequently used products, but we separate out what is client-facing and what is vendor-facing, client-facing for your proposals and invoices, and vendor-facing for your purchase orders. And we do this for you automatically. So the goal here is when you add a product to the library, add as much information as you possibly can. You want this to be as thorough as you can from the start if you are clipping or adding a specific product. And you'll see over here when I'm in my product library, I'm just on the edit mode. It says use a vendor-facing description on purchase orders. You have the space to add a specific vendor description that will only appear on your purchase orders. We want you to be able to separate out your client-facing and your vendor-facing. Of course, there might be different descriptions. You don't want to get shopped. This is exactly where you can do so. You have a client-facing and then you have a vendor-facing description. As I scroll down, of course, your cost per unit is never going to be shown to your client, only your total cost inclusive of your markup. And additional product information here. Think about it again, as Ivy is protecting you, anything that you can lead your client to shopping you, such as the manufacturer, the SKU, those things are going to be hidden from your client. Those are only vendor-facing items. However, materials, dimensions, finish, those are things that your client probably are important for them to see. So all of those are going to appear for your client. And you can see all of these the descriptions that you can add, all of these specifications. You can also do so in the product clipper. So I'm just on my favorite vendor's website. I'm going to go ahead and open up the clipper just to show you where you could find these specific information. So first of all, we have the description over here. And then you have the ability to add a vendor description, which is specifically for your POs. As I scroll down and click on add full product details, you'll see SKU, the SKU, manufacturer. Again, those are only vendor facing. And then materials, dimensions, finish, color, those are specifically for both your vendor and your client. Okay. So just want to differentiate that, and I want to show you as well how this product will look on the client side, and then as we move to purchase orders, what you will see. Ivy separates it out for you automatically, so you don't even need to think about it. It's really just about populating your product list with the most detailed and specific information that you can. Okay. So with that, I'm going to go into one of my projects here. And go ahead into a proposal. And, you know, one of the things that I constantly am trying to articulate to our users is best practices as I see them, as I recommend. And this is actually one of them, which is starting with a proposal. And it's so important to start with a proposal, even if you're not sending that proposal to your client. You want to have a place that you can ideate, that you can see the total cost of the products that you are specifying. You can see, you can create your tier sheets. Like, you need a starting point. And what's so special about proposals is we allow you and Ivy to collect a deposit on proposals, which we want you to do. We want you to protect yourself, collect as much money as you can up front before paying out your vendor. So don't ever start with just a purchase order. And I will articulate that right now, but basically my first rule of POs is start with a proposal. And let me go ahead and show you why I do that. So I have a proposal over here that is just ready for me to go. It's that same rug that we were just looking at, the product description. And remember all of the details, all of the specifications that we had added. You'll see right over here, the materials are showing, the client-facing description is showing, and the dimensions are showing. Even though we had the SKU, the manufacturer, we had a markup, we had a vendor, all of that information is hidden because this part is client-facing. You'll see also over here the total cost inclusive of markup. And you might notice that this is a different title than what I originally added to the product. It's called Living Room Area Rug, but I actually titled it Asha Area Rug when I added it to my library. What I did there was I changed the title on the proposal, and it automatically changed the title for my client-facing view. But the beauty here is that as you move to a purchase order, you're going to notice that only the vendor-facing information will show there. So I'm actually going to redo this process. I did this yesterday, but I'm going to just delete this PO really quickly and we'll do it together. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is go back to that proposal. And part of the reason that we also want you to start with a proposal, and why I recommend starting with a proposal, is because when you start with a proposal, it allows you to manage and see the product throughout the course of its life cycle. You'll see it move from a proposal to a purchase order or an invoice. You'll see the cost. You'll see the money that you are selling it for and the money that you are purchasing that item for. So starting from a proposal, even if you're not sending it to your client, is really important. So what I'm going to do with this proposal is just collect 100%. Let's say my client paid me the full 100% via check. I'm going to create this payment. And I'm now going to convert this proposal to a PO. This is my recommended practice, proposal to PO. And the reason being, we want to make sure now that all the pricing that we just presented to our client is correct. We want to get this information to our vendor. We want to start the ordering process immediately. And what you'll see here when I am going to transfer it over to a purchase order, the title is no longer living room area rug. The title is actually the exact title that I had clipped, the exact title that I added to my library initially. And the vendor is associated with the item, and you'll see that the PO is made for you right over here. And while we were on that screen, by the way, I want to tell you about a trick. If you are going to be creating a purchase order and you only want to create a PO for a specific item, I'll show you an example of what this looks like. You can basically selectively or progressively create POs, and I'll show you what that looks like here. The goal is that if you don't want to create a PO at that moment for one reason or another, you don't have to. And the way to do that is simply to click Create Purchase Order. And here where it says Vendor, simply click No Vendor Selected. So that's a little trick. If you want to not create a PO at that time for the other, and you want to just selectively create a PO for one item, simply click No Vendor Selected. Of course, the reason being, if there is no vendor, there is no PO. So that's exactly it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to that PO that we just created, because I want to show you what this looks like, what information actually carries over from client facing to vendor facing. So let's dive into edit mode here. I'm on the purchase order that we just made. It's for that one rug item that we had proposed and collected payment for. And you'll see over here the purchase order details. What looks familiar over here? Remember my receiving warehouse that we just saw in the address book? I have over here my receiving warehouse set as my default shipping address. If I need to change that here, company addresses are all of the addresses that are in my address book. So again, if you have a fabricator, you have a different warehouse, you're shipping to your office, whatever it is, you can set those frequently used addresses and select them over here under company addresses. So it's no need to just type and change it on the spot. Simply select from what you have already created. The purchase order date defaults to today's date, whatever it is that whenever you are creating this document. However, if you are retroactively or proactively creating a purchase order, you can simply set the date here accordingly. And this date is what is used when we're going to look at reports a little bit later for purchase orders. This is the date which will be discussed at that time. You have payment terms. If you have payment terms according to a vendor, you can always select here net 15, net 30, or custom. The document owner here is by default me, as I am this project's owner. However, this is a place for you to, if you have an expediter on your team, if somebody specific is dealing with purchase orders, purchasing, you can go ahead and they can make themselves the document owner. And what that means is that they will now be the new assignee for these line items on this purchase order. So it's a good way to identify responsibility, who did what, who is responsible for what in one spot. Okay. And now let's go ahead and dive into the line item itself. So I want to go through all the little tidbits here just to make sure that you totally understand how purchase orders work on Ivy. So first of all, you'll see the product title over here. Once again, that's the title that we initially clipped. That's not the client-facing one. That is simply the title of this product that we've determined. And it's not editable here because we want that to be what our vendor sees. That is the title as we pulled it. And you'll see down here under the description, not only do we have the vendor description populate, but we also have the manufacturer, materials, dimensions, and the SKU. And if you'll remember on our client-facing side on the proposal, the SKU was missing, the manufacturer was missing, and that was on purpose. We hide all the information that can lead your client to shopping you. So you'll only see here these tidbits of information on the purchasing, on the PO side. Okay, you have your image here automatically populated, the one that's associated with the item. We have our quantity, our price, and you'll notice that this is the unit cost of the item. It is not the marked up cost. Our vendor doesn't need to know what we're charging markup. This is only the vendor relevant information. And if your vendor is charging you shipping, if you know what that shipping cost is, you could simply add it here. And mark the item, whether it is tax paid to the vendor or not, you can go ahead and mark that here. And this is a place when your client or when your vendor, when your vendor sends you your estimated shipping information, let's say it's 8 to 10 weeks, you can go ahead and select the estimated ship date whenever you know it, either here or on the project tracker, which we'll get to a little bit later. And lastly, this is a room tag that I added on the proposal. By default, the room tag is populated as the side mark, but here on the line item is where you can add the specific side mark. Again, this is only vendor facing. So let's say this is living room, Bobby, rug. Okay, so that's the line item deep dive. It's only the vendor information. And when I go ahead and click on add another item, I want to show you what I can do here. So what I'm going to do is simply add a pillow for this same vendor. And the reason why I want to show you what this looks like is because this is something that sets apart purchase orders from proposals and invoices. On POs over here, you actually have the ability to drag and drop. So if you by default brought this information over, but you think that it would make more sense for your vendor to see items in a specific order, like the fabric with the with the sofa body that you are creating, and you want them right next to each other, you can simply drag and drop over here on edit mode. So that's fun. And then you'll see over here the default memo that is included for your POs is right over there. And I'm simply going to save. Now, some of you might be asking, okay, I work with a vendor like Restoration Hardware, Wayfair.com. They would never use a PO, right? Correct. If you sent them a PO, they would probably be like, what is this? Why are you sending this? Please email our support team. But even if you're working with those vendors, it is so imperative for you to create a PO on Ivy, because what Ivy allows you to do is track your money in and your money out as it pertains to a project. So in this case, we're collecting $1,100 for a rug. However, $775 from that is our base price. That is the price that we are paying out our vendor. If we don't create a PO, it looks like to the government, we're collecting $1,100 in income. And they're gonna be like, great, where's that money? Where's the taxes on the $1,100? However, it's important to remember, we are only making $400 on that item. And the only way we can actually reflect that is by creating a PO. So even if you don't send a purchase order to your vendor, it is imperative that you make purchase orders for every single thing that you purchase. because that will allow you to see your money in and your money out as it pertains to a project. Okay. So a couple of fun facts here while we're on the save mode over here. You'll see this little chain link button, the connected document. This indicates that this purchase order is connected to another document. And this is why I always say start with a proposal. It'll allow you to just understand everything going on so much easier. So you'll see this is linked to proposal, the original one that we had sent to our client, and we could see the status of it right over here. What we can also do is see the line items themselves over here, just as we would expect. But I want to show you something cool here. When you click on the top right-hand corner and for the 3 dots, you actually have the ability to download this as a PDF. So let's see what that looks like over here. You'll see it looks really professional, has your logo. Again, it has all the relevant materials that you need to know, the dimensions, manufacturer, the SKU, and of course, only the vendor-facing information. And you also have the ability to view the document timeline. So if you want to remember if you sent this, if you want to know if your vendor opened it, when they opened it, all you need to do is click View Document Timeline, and this will give you a timeline of this document. I think that sounds pretty self-explanatory, but it allows you here to remember whether you actually sent it, when they opened it, confirm that they received it. It's a really great tool to have. Okay, so what I want to do now is really help you understand what this looks like on the vendor side. So when you send this via email, you have a couple of things here. So first of all, your vendor email is populated automatically for you, and you can actually BCC yourself or add a specific reply to. So if you have an expediter that is handling all of your POs, purchasing, you could set the default reply to right over here. And you can also BCC yourself, BCC your expediter to have a copy of this in your internal inbox. We have a subject line that you can add, and you also have a default message that populates over here. You can set those in your account settings if you want to change that at any time. And on your vendor side, this will actually send them a PDF attachment. So this is an example of a previous purchase order that I sent myself as the vendor. You'll see my default message, you see my subject line with my logo, and here is the purchase order that I sent myself. It is an attachment to this email, and this is what your vendor would see. Okay, so really great to just understand exactly what your vendor is experiencing as well. So what I'd like to do is make a payment here. And again, who am I sending this payment to? Well, if you're working with an IV purchasing agent and they are your vendor whom you're sending the purchase order, most of them take online payments. You're going to just want to verify that your vendor takes online payments through IV. In this case, I could tell you a lot of the purchasing agents actually do. You can simply click make a payment, enter your credit card information, and submit your payment online via IV. Super easy. But if you're working with a vendor, like we talked about, Restoration Hardware, Wayfair, somebody who doesn't actually take payments through IV, you're going to want to record the payment. Again, money in, money out, understanding exactly where a product is in its life cycle, exactly where you are in the project. So I can simply record the check payment that I'm making right over here, just like that. And so some of you might be asking, okay, should I create a purchase order if my vendor is sending me a vendor invoice anyways? That's enough of a record for me to have, right? Yes, but you still need to create a purchase order. And my best practice, one of the tricks that I like to do that I would recommend doing is actually, first of all, when you receive that vendor invoice from your vendor, upload it as an attachment over here to your purchase order. Centralize your workflow. Have everything here in one place. So I could attach, for example, over here, my vendor invoice, and you're going to want to make sure that your vendor invoice matches your purchase order exactly, or more accurately, that your purchase order matches your vendor invoice exactly. So let's say my vendor sent me an invoice and the shipping was different from the time that I originally created the PO. I'm going to go ahead and change my cost accordingly. Let's say my vendor comes back and says, oh, but Sivan, when you purchase this, I'm on my last one. This is now $875, not $775. No problem. Change the cost and make sure it matches the vendor invoice exactly. And it's interesting. I want to show you exactly what this will look like in the project tracker in a second. But let's just remember that we sold this to our client at $775 unit cost, but we're actually paying out $875. Okay. So let me go ahead and record the payment for this updated cost that my vendor sent me and create it. So now I'm going to go over here to my purchase orders tab in this project and show you a couple of things that we could do. So the first is going to be being able to see an outline of what is going on purchasing side. So you'll see exactly how much we're spending total in purchasing. You'll also see what's actually been paid and what our profitability is. This is basically what our selling cost was to our clients and what our purchasing cost was to our vendors. So we subtract the difference, and that is exactly the total profitability. So it's really important to create your PO to understand your profitability. But one other thing that you could do here is you see this little eyeball button. This eyeball button exists on all of your lists of documents, your proposals, your invoices, your purchase orders, and it gives you a preview into what is exactly on that, on this. It gives you a little preview of what is on this document. So you don't need to necessarily click in. You can simply click on the items and you can click on the little eyeball button and see the buttons that are inside, or the items that are inside. But I want to go back here to this PO because I forgot something important. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this payment. I can do so because it was a manual payment, so I'm just going to delete it. Let me refresh the page. And you'll see right over here, I'm going to go back to my purchase order. So one thing that we've recently introduced that's really cool that I love is the ability to merge purchase orders. We had gotten a lot of feedback from designers before saying, my vendor is going to kill me if I send them 4 different POs. Let's reconcile that. Let's consolidate that. So what we have recently introduced, I think it was about 2.5 months ago that we introduced this, is the ability to merge unpaid open purchase orders. And the reason why we specifically restricted this to unpaid POs is because if you have a paid purchase order, we assume that there is a matching vendor invoice for those items. So you can only, and we want the vendor invoice to match your purchase order. So you can only combine unpaid POs for the same vendor in the same project. So what you'll see here is I have 2 open purchase orders for the citizenry. And I have the ability here to merge the POs. And what's going to happen is when I click on this, you'll see the other qualifying purchase orders. In this case, I have one from the citizenry that is open, it's unpaid. And what will happen when I choose the POs to merge, I'm selecting the other POs to merge into my original document. So I clicked merge POs from 10083. I see my list, and basically this will all combine into PO 10083. You cannot undo the merging of purchase orders. So please remember that. So I'm simply going to click continue. And now you'll see we have one PO for the citizenry. When I go ahead and click on it, I will see all 4 items merged into PO 10083. Okay. So that's a fun little trick. If you don't know about it, you know now. I'm going to go ahead and record my payment again because before I was not able to merge paid purchase orders. So I'm going to simply record my payment that I made to my vendor and go back to my purchase orders list. You'll see right over here. One of the action items that you'll see also under the actions button is to mark as closed. And a lot of people say, what does that mean? When would I close a PO? That is totally up to you. It's really an internal status that you decide when you want to do. So I know a lot of designers, once the item has been confirmed shipped by the vendor or installed into the client's home, at that point they will mark it as closed, kind of, nothing else to worry about. But that is totally up to you. You decide when you do that. Okay. So what I'm going to do, Anastasia is asking, hi Anastasia, I was going to email you later, is asking, what if you only pay a partial PO, so half at the order and the other half after ship or delivery? No problem, you can always record the specific amount that you're paying and your status will be partially paid. So when I go to make a payment, I will simply record my check payment, for example, and here I can specify the exact amount that I am paying. So let's say I'm paying 50% to my vendor. So I'm going to call this $35.98, add my reference number. And you'll see the payment for that amount is recorded. And when I go to my purchase orders list, the status is partially paid. So if you need to, you'll see there's a balance, you'll see that the full amount hasn't been paid. And when I actually go to our project tracker to track all of our POs and all of our products in this project, we will also see that this has been partially paid out. Okay. Meredith, you're asking a specific question integrating as it pertains to QuickBooks. So I'm going to follow up with you afterwards with some more information about that. Okay, so what I want to do now, so we have our purchase order list over here. Again, this is where we'll see everything pertaining to the project specifically. We've edited the item, we see what's client facing, we see what's vendor facing, and this allows us to really work from, oh wow, wait, what many more questions have come in. So let me go ahead and look at these right now. Barbara Dornbush is asking, where should I put additional shipping information, for example, no Friday deliveries? I would put that under the memo section. So let's go ahead and edit this PO. And you'll see over here, memo to be displayed on the purchase order. This is exactly where I would put it, because when your vendor opens up the purchase order that you send them, they can see the memo at the bottom, and that would include, no specific deliveries on Friday. And what's really cool, if you do have a list or if you do have a project-specific exception like that, like no Friday deliveries, let me take you to the project settings and show you where you can actually set that on the project level so you don't need to type it in every single time. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is navigate to my project, click on Edit Project, and I'm going to scroll down, and you'll see over here at the bottom, there's a little thing that says Additional Settings. That's what I'm going to click on right now. And these additional settings let you set project-specific memos and emails. So if you have one client that says no Friday, no weekend deliveries, let's set that on the project level, because obviously that that differentiates from client to client. So we could say over here, no Friday deliveries, please. And now this will populate on every single purchase order created within this project. So it's really cool. Just a little side trick while we're talking about that, Barbara. I'm just looking at questions that came in. One moment. Great question. Okay, Jessica, you have a great question. What's the best way to handle cost changes between proposal and PO phase? Should those additional costs be added back to the original proposal or convert proposal to invoice and add the cost onto an invoice? I love this question, Jessica. This makes me so happy because this makes me like, you see, I'm beaming, you know, like this is exactly what I want you to, this is exactly how I want you to use Ivy. So as I discussed earlier, start with the proposal. The proposal is subject to change. It is all of the estimated costs of your item. And of course, as we saw in that purchase order, our vendor came back and said, oh, it's $100 more since we last talked. Okay, if you want to bill that back to your client, which I certainly hope you do, bill your client back for everything, even your Ivy membership, make that money. If you want to bill that back to your client, what I would do is I would add that on the invoicing phase. So let's go back to the original proposal for that rug specifically. And we already collected payment here. Again, it was a deposit. Prices are subject to change. We're collecting shipping costs at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this to an invoice. I've gotten confirmation from my vendor that it's in stock. It's $100 more. So let's go ahead and create an invoice for this item. And here, Jessica, I would change the cost on this invoice because now we are issuing, okay, now we know it was also, by the way, $75 shipping. We're adding the shipping cost. We are billing our client for the difference. So I can go ahead and save this. But I'm not going to do that here because I want to show you something specifically about this item on the project tracker. But this is where I would change it, is exactly that. When I get that cost for my client or for my vendor, I would bill it back to my client. So they would get that balance basically. Denise, you have asked a couple of questions about retainers, and I don't want to stray too far from the topic of purchase orders. So what I would do if I were you, you were asking about retainers specifically. I absolutely recommend working with retainers. Retainers are an amazing way to protect yourself, collect a lump sum of money up front, collect that security deposit, hold on to it, whatever you need to do. So once you collect a retainer payment in Ivy, you can simply apply that retainer as a payment to any of your purchase orders. So, wow, not purchase orders, any of your proposals or invoices. So I'll show you an example in another project where I know I have several retainers already created. And then we'll go ahead we have, you see, a bunch of retainers. Look at our client so generously giving us $75,000 up front. I can go ahead and apply this as a payment to my proposal as that deposit. And what I would always recommend doing is I'm going to click on record payment. You can also record the payment directly from the proposal itself. But when I go to record a payment, I can simply click apply retainer. And you'll see over here that I can apply the specific amount. So in this case, I will simply record it. And what I would do in that case, if you want to, I would send this proposal. You'll see that it's stamped as paid. I would still send this to your client in order to show them the application of the retainer right over there. John, you're asking, what did you say the advantage of closing a PO was? A lot of designers will simply close POs. It's a status change. So they want to say, we're done with this PO completely. We want to make sure that it's been installed. Like, you know, when you're done with this purchase order, you can just close it. It's of course totally optional, but that's what I would recommend. Elementary questions I love, Barbara, so please keep them coming. Barbara is asking, do you wait for vendor invoice to send PO or do you send hard copy of PO with check? That is, I think, a systems question that you can ask other designers in our Facebook group what they would do. More than likely, what would happen is that you would send the purchase order and then they would send you the invoice for the item. Or upon sending them an RFQ and confirmation of purchasing, you'll get that vendor invoice. So whatever comes first, it could differentiate from vendor to vendor. You just want to make sure that your vendor invoice that you receive, whether it was after you sent the PO or before you created the PO, matches your PO exactly. That is the best way for you to reconcile what's coming in and what's going out. Okay, Jacqueline, you are asking about the differences between proposals and invoices. I'm going to answer that a little bit later as extra credit, just because it's not necessarily specifically to purchase orders. I want to send you two separate webinars I've hosted. One is called Setting Yourself Up for Success on Ivy, where I discuss a lot the difference between proposals and invoices, and that little workflow that I just went through. And also, the gist of it is basically invoices are official documents of income, and proposals are accounting fluff. So you pay taxes based on the invoiced amount. So you always have to create an invoice, and you don't really want to mess with them. That's the short answer. But with that, I am going to be moving on from our Q&A portion, just because it's already been 45 minutes that we've been together. I can't believe it. I still have so many things I want to cover with you guys. So let's move on. Okay, so we are looking right now at the PO list in our project. How can we see our PO list across all projects? Well, let me show you. What I'm going to do, Claire, is click on projects, and I'm going to navigate to all projects. And this is where you could see the global view of all of your documents across all of your projects. So first of all, we'll see our project list over here. You'll see the ability to archive a project. So if you're no longer working with the project, you want it out of your list, no problem, just archive it. You can always reverse the archive if you need to. The second one is proposals. Of course, that's pretty self-explanatory. You could see all of your proposals overall across all of your projects, but we're talking about purchase orders on this webinar. Let's see our purchase orders list globally. This is, again, all of our POs across all of our projects. So Ivy is a project-based system, but this allows you to see everything globally. So if you're about to call your vendor and you want to say, okay, I have 7 open invoices for Cherish, what's the status on XYZ? You could just come here and see an overview in one place. And you can also search. So if I'm looking for a specific vendor like Cherish, like we just discussed, I could see all of my Cherish POs right over here. Okay, so a little secret over there, you could see all of your purchase orders in one place. And this is where you can also see all of your payments across all of your projects. Okay. So that's a little tidbit, a little hidden feature that you might not know about. I highly recommend utilizing the all projects. It's an amazing tool for you to have. So what I want to do is, I know I'm kind of jumping between global and project level, but I mentioned earlier about connected documents, the importance of starting with a proposal and moving from there. And I also wanted to show you what Ivy does and what it looks like when you have a different cost than what you sold it to your client and what you ended up buying it from your vendor. So what I'm in right now is my Bobby's Malibu Mansion project, and I'm in the project tracker. And the project tracker, for those of you that don't know, is my favorite feature. If you've tuned into Ivy webinars before, you know how obsessed I am with the project tracker. It is a global overview of every single product and service in your project. And it gives you the status, it breaks it down for you. This is a spreadsheet that is made automatically for you. And I've talked to so many designers and know that this is something that you take hours making. It's incredible. So What I want to do is go through that specific rug over here. So a couple of things about the rug. First of all, you'll see the title, but you'll also see the title in parentheses that we showed it to our client as, right? That's our alias title. You can see the status of this item. Its most recent status, it's that it's on a purchase order. And remember we had a different client and a different vendor facing description? Well, right over here, you'll see client. This is what the client sees. And vendor specifically, you'll see the vendor description. So that's cool. You see two things. And now when I look at the unit cost, look at this. We have something pop up that indicates that we sold this for $775, but we purchased it for not the number that we anticipated, $775. Obviously, we sold it to our client. We want to purchase it for the same cost. We actually purchased it for more than what we anticipated. So you'll see over here, if that number differentiates between what you sold it and what you bought it for, we will tell you. We'll say, you sold this for $875, not $775 as you anticipated. And it's really easy to see this, and I want to show you how cool this is. When you click on the pop-up view of this item, one thing that you'll see, I'm in the pop-up view, I'm looking at basically the same spreadsheet just in a pop-up form. As I scroll down to my accounting, how cool is this? We see in red that our purchase cost is different from what we sold it for. It's green if we actually bought it for less than what we sold it for. So we're like, hey, we're letting you know you made extra money, more money than you anticipated, or you're losing money. And in this case, the same thing, the shipping will be red because we didn't actually sell the shipping to our client. So that's really cool. I wanted to show you just in the project tracker how you can know from the PO what is sold and what is bought and the differences between those. So you see right over here again, the shipping selling cost is 0 and the purchasing cost is 75. And as I scroll across, you'll see my status breakdowns of each individual document that this product is on. Connected documents. This is the beauty of connected documents. You'll say, okay, this proposal has been invoiced, this invoice has been paid, and the purchase order is closed. I am done with this item. And a really good way and you'll see the estimated ship date from the PO right over there. And you can add all of your shipping and delivery information. Side mark is populated. Okay, how cool is that? That is my favorite part. So over here, again, selling cost 0, purchasing cost 195. I want to see if I have an example of the opposite. Oh, and if you see just one number as unit cost, that means that the purchasing and selling cost was the same as anticipated. Oh, and here's one. Okay, so here's an example where we ended up selling it for more than what we bought it. Extra money. Who doesn't love that? It was on sale. So what I can actually do here when I click on the eyeball button and go back to the accounting, you'll see that that is now green. We made extra money. We're like, woohoo, green, 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 green. So that's really cool to see in the project tracker, and that's what I wanted to show you guys. So you will see here the difference between the client-facing, the vendor-facing descriptions, and the purchase and sell costs. All right. We have some more questions. Okay. Andrea is asking shipping addresses. It looks like you had some default addresses such as workrooms or your receiving warehouse. Is there a way to make these addresses show up in the dropdown of every PO, or does every address have to be put in on the project level? So this is, you might have tuned in a little bit later, but absolutely. This was the first thing I actually covered on today's webinar. You can set on an account level those default addresses that you use often. So I'm just going to my account, clicking on addresses. If you have that receiving warehouse, workrooms, whatever it is, you can simply add them on an account level and they will populate on all of your drop downs, not just for your project addresses, like your billing and default shipping, but on every PO if you need to change it. So this is actually where you would add it and where it would populate for your PO. Okay. We also got a question about RFQs, if that's coming to Ivy. It will be coming in 2019, later in 2019. We have some really exciting client-facing things coming up in Q1, or even by the end, yeah, in Q1, which I'll tell you about. We are introducing room boards and mood boards. We will have a 360 product view and a vendor tax, which all three are really huge initiatives, which I'm so excited about. And I will also be hosting a new features webinar when those do launch. So making sure that you guys know exactly how to use Ivy and how to take advantage of these really, really, really fun new features. Okay. So for those of you Friday warriors that are still with me, thank you so much for being here. I want to show you one last thing in Ivy as it pertains to purchase orders. And again, if you have any questions, now is the time to ask. I will do a little Q&A session at the end again. But this pertains specifically to reporting and purchase order reporting. So on one hand, we saw in our all projects view, we saw the global purchase orders list. And I'm going to toggle over to my reports because we actually have a specific purchase orders reports that you can pull for a project. So or for your company, excuse me. So what I'm going to do here is I'm in my reports and I can select my purchase orders report. And remember when I said, look at this date, this is the date that I'm going to come back to you on my purchase order. When you're selecting custom dates or all dates for a specific PO, it refers to the date of the purchase order, which in this case, we had created the PO today, the date was today. So you can specify whether to see your purchase orders from the last week, the last month, whatever it is. Let's say we want to see specifically from the last 2 weeks. This gives you the ability to also pull a report across all of your projects or on an individual project level. You can also specify the vendor. So if you're about to call that vendor and you're like, I need to know all my cherished POs, no problem. But you also have the ability to see only vendors, all vendors, all POs basically. And you can specify the status. So I could see all statuses, or I could see here all POs that I've marked as sent or that have been sent. Like you can, this is basically an opportunity for you to really just get the reporting that you need. So in this case, I'm going to pull a report for all vendors across all projects, all statuses from the last 2 weeks, specifically for POs, and simply click Generate Report. And you'll see in just a moment, it's right over here, ready to download. Let me go ahead and open this report just to show you what it looks like, but it will give you that overview of all your purchase orders from the last 2 weeks, all vendors, all statuses. So it's just opening up in Excel, one moment. And if you don't have Excel, I have a Mac, it would open up in preview. And then if you don't have Excel and you want to work out of like an Excel or .csv, you can simply drag and drop into Google Sheets. It's actually a nice little workaround. Okay, so you'll see I only have, in this case, my purchase order list. We have for the last 2 weeks, I only have 3 POs from the last 2 weeks. And you'll see the date, the vendor, the shipping address, and this will allow you to basically make sure that everything is in order. Okay. Cool. So with that, I would love to open it up for any questions that I have not yet gotten to. That's it. I want to let's recap a couple of the things that we talked about today. Address book and the account settings, which we just saw again. That is where you could set account frequently used addresses. We talked about products and what is client facing, what is vendor facing. Always populate your products with as much information as you can, because we will separate out what is client facing, what is vendor facing for you. The recommended workflow that I recommended, start from the proposal, convert to purchase order. And why is that important? You need to create purchase orders, even if you're not sending it to your client, to your vendor, just so that you have an idea of money in versus money out in a project. You can progressively PO. You can choose not to create a PO, basically. You also have the ability to add on the line item, drag and drop, merge POs, your document timeline. We saw what it looked like for your vendor when you sent the PO to them. Best practice recommendation, upload your vendor invoice to your PO and make sure that it matches exactly. You have the ability to merge your POs. You'll see the connected documents. And we saw the cool little tips and tricks in the project tracker, purchasing versus selling costs, when that differentiates, what it looks like to you, and our client and vendor facing description. And of course, our global all projects / all POs list and our PO report. Okay, so any questions? It looks like no questions are coming in right now, so I will assume that this was so thorough that you guys understand exactly how to work with POs and Ivy. And I just want, oh wait, Carly, okay. So, oh, Carly's asking, okay, I'm gonna get back to you, Carly, on the closing PO and Ivy when you're connected to QuickBooks. I just wanna confirm that. I don't wanna misinform you. So I will get back to you on that. So with that, I'm so happy you guys tuned in. Happy holidays, po, Merry Christmas. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year. I'm excited to share all of our new features in the new year with you guys. Please make sure to go to www.ivy.co/Ivy training. That is where I post all of my all of the webinars that I've hosted that I mentioned, Denise, that I would send you, Jacqueline, that I would send you. You can watch all of the webinars that I've ever hosted here. And you can also sign up for upcoming webinars. So great tool for you guys to have right over there. So with that, thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions, please feel free to email your dedicated account manager at support@ivy.co. So take care and talk to you guys soon.